Welcome everyone to Kawowo Sports. Today we are privileged to have the national team coach, Johnathan McKinstry, the first Northern Irish manager to manage 3 national teams. Welcome, Johnny.
No, thank you very much. It's good to be here and join you.
Yeah, so what do you make of the fact that you are the first national team coach from Northern Ireland to manage 3 national teams?
I suppose it's not something that you overly think about a lot. I think the modern trend of football management is that in a career you can expect to have several jobs nowadays. You know, you go back 20, 30, 40 years to the days of like Bill Shankly or Arrigo Sacchi, and these coaches maybe only had 1 or 2, maybe 3 clubs during their career. But I think the modern trend of football is that you even look at the very top managers, you know, like whether it's Jose Mourinho, Mauricio Pochettino, even Pep Guardiola, they have multiple jobs. It's not a case, so to go through a career nowadays, you expect to have between maybe 5 and 10 employers, which is a big change. So the fact that, you know, 3 of mine so far have been national team positions, it's, in terms of being the first Irishman to do that, is something that maybe will register later when you look back on everything. But I know in the moment, obviously, being given that task of looking after a national team is a huge responsibility, you know, and one that's, you know, I'm very honored to do, you know, both in my previous roles and also here in Uganda.
And then a lot of coaches from Europe have come to Africa. What inspired you to take the coaching to this continent?
So my first sort of engagement with African football, I was still very young. I was maybe only 19, 20 years of age. I spent some time in Ghana, maybe 5 or 6 weeks with the Right to Dream Academy in Ghana. And I was still a university student at the time, and just it caught me. It was like a fire inside of me, you know, seeing not just the talent of the players, but their pure determination that they would make it. You know, that nothing was going to stop them. There was no barrier too big that they couldn't, you know, climb it. And this really was something quite different than maybe the European context that I was used to. I think a lot of young players in Europe, they're a little bit spoiled maybe. They get given everything. And so, you know, motivation sometimes, you know, you see a young player, 13, 14 years of age in Europe, and they're maybe not so motivated to train every day, but you don't see that. I didn't see that in Ghana all those years ago. And you're talking, that's almost 15 years ago now. And I didn't see that. And that, for me, work ethic and that inner determination and desire to be the best you can be is central to everything I do as a coach. And so when I meet players, regardless of how good they are, with that same drive and determination, it really attracts me to that environment. And from that, I always thought to myself, okay, if I get the opportunity to come back to Africa and work, I will. I moved to America. I was working in New York, and a phone call came and the opportunity to come back to Sierra Leone to run a football academy initially was presented to me, and I thought, yeah, I think that's something I really want to do, because that just drive and determination.
So who made that
huge.
phone call from Sierra Leone?
So that was actually, so the person is a man called Tom Vernon initially, who now is the owner of FC Nordsjælland in Scandinavia and the Right to Dream Academy. They were sort of the consultants for setting up an academy for Craig Bellamy, who was the former Celtic and Liverpool and, you know, Manchester City striker. And I was asked would I like to come and sort of be in charge and set up initially the football department. But then as time progressed, I basically was given the task of running the entire sort of foundation, the entire academy, for a period of time. So yeah, it was an interesting choice to make, to leave New York City for Sierra Leone.
Freetown.
For Freetown, Sierra Leone, and not even Freetown. We were based in Tombo, which is a fishing village 1 hour from Freetown. So that's a big cultural change. But for me, I looked at it from a footballing point of view, and there was something always was going to drag me back to Africa. It was drawing me back in, and, you know, it was a fantastic decision to take.
And then having managed in Sierra Leone, then in Rwanda, and now here in Uganda, how do you rate the football culture in these countries?
I think they're all different. It's impossible in any context, football or anything else, to talk about Africa is, because all parts of Africa are so different. I know some people maybe in Europe and America like to try and think of Africa as one place.
Yeah.
But
a lot of people think that when you say you come into Africa,
yeah.
it's like a country, just as Uganda it is.
No, but that's as crazy to say that as to say England is the same as Serbia. It's not. They're very different culturally. So what you find in Sierra Leone, was a remarkably colorful country, that was in love with their music, and, the vibrancy of life and the energy was significant, but also chaotic, massively chaotic, as West Africa tends to be, beautifully chaotic. To then come to Rwanda, which was very organized, everything just works in Rwanda, in Kigali. It's a very organized city, but maybe the energy is not the same. It was more organized, easier to get things done, but the energy level and the talent level football-wise was not as high. You got to remember, in Sierra Leone, my squad had players from AC Milan, from Glasgow Celtic, from Norwich City, from teams in Major League Soccer, all top players. Whereas in Rwanda, a lot less. And then you come here to Uganda, which is a little bit of a mix of it. I think Uganda, the energy of Uganda is much more similar to a West African nation. Not as chaotic. Definitely a bit more chaotic than Kigali, but nowhere near on the level of the West African cities. But you definitely have that energy here. But you also are better organized here. So in Uganda, the organization and how things work is much better than in West Africa. And you have the footballing talent here as well. So I like to think, coming here to Uganda, there's a nice mixture of what was good about West Africa, but what was also good about Rwanda and East Africa. So yeah, I'm enjoying here massively.
And then in terms of potential talent, where do the three rank from first to third?
The thing about Uganda is, I think Uganda is untapped at the moment. The big advantage that West African nations have in terms of, developing their talent and identifying it is there's so many academies, like proper, and I don't mean pay-to-play academies. Like here in Uganda, there's maybe lots of organizations that are termed academies, but the kids maybe pay something small to come and get some coaching, and there's a place for that, those football schools. But it's not an academy in the true sense of the word, of the best players from wherever they are in the country come to be there. We don't really have that here in Uganda from a young age. Whereas you go to West Africa, and in Ghana, Sierra Leone, my academy in Sierra Leone, the boys came into a full residential environment at 11 years of age. Every day they were getting 3 hours of football training and 5 hours of school on site every day. So they have the exposure and the support, whereas here in Uganda, at the moment, we don't really have that to any group. I know there's one or two people trying to move on in that direction, and that should be supported. But I think that's the big challenge, is there is talent here, there's no doubt about that, but the majority of Ugandan young footballers, the first time they get into an organized football structure, they're 16, 17, 18 years of age, which is really too late. You need to get into that organized football structure with good quality coaching and guidance at the age of 11, 12. And when we get there, I think you'll see the talent level of Uganda, skyrocket.
And then talking about that, Uganda is one of the countries that people see a lot of potential, but we've never had any player in the top leagues in Europe, save for maybe Majid Mssi in 1992 in France. But how do we get there? And you, as a coach that has been around Sierra Leone, has been around US and anywhere, how do you help these players get to that level so that we can have at least a player in Italy, France, Germany, or even England?
So the first thing I think people have to understand is playing at that level is extremely difficult. I think some people outside football think that being a footballer is about your talent, and a part of it is. But look, in England, it's something like 0.05% of academy players become professional footballers. Every year, Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, will have 20 under 21 players signed to their club. It is not uncommon for 0 of those players to be offered contracts to stay at that club. Some years it'll be 1 player, some years it'll be 2 players, but some years none of that senior academy team will be retained at the club. So to be that top level is extremely difficult. To get that first contract is extremely difficult. But then when you get that contract, when you're 18, 19 years of age, you're then not competing with just people your own age. You've now got players who have 200, 300, 500 professional appearances who are saying, well, I'm not just going to hand you my starting shirt. You've got to take it off me. So being a pro, being a top pro in those leagues is extremely difficult. So that's the first thing I think people have to understand, because I think the mindset that we give some of our young players is that, oh, your talent is enough. It's not. Talk to Dennis Onyango, talk to Farouk Mia, the guys who've played at the top level of the game. Talk to Ibrahim Sakaja. They will tell you that there's lots of talented players. In fact, they will tell you that they played with guys who were more talented than they were. But they had the work ethic, the desire, the support around them to succeed. And I think that is a huge thing. But also exposure of our players. One of the things I was actually discussing with our head of football, Ali Moebe, just before I came to this interview, and I've put a proposal on the president's desk, is how we can get our players more exposure around the world on scouting platforms and the like. Because to be honest with you, I had a phone call from a friend of mine who's a head coach of a club 3 weeks ago. And he said to me, he was like, Johnny, I'm looking for a player. I'm looking for this position. Do you have anyone you can recommend? And I said, well, we've got this one lad who I know is maybe coming out of contract now, and we had him in our Chan squad, and he's really talented. I think you should look at him. He's young, he's talented. And the response was, oh, do you have video you can send me? But this player hasn't played for Uganda yet. And then the video available for the UPL is less. I know it's on some platforms, but I can't go on Google and find those videos. And so I'm saying to the guy, well, let me look around and see if I can get some videos together. But it's not easy. And that makes that potential transfer of that player to a top league more challenging. So we have to increase the exposure of our players. And you know, that's one of the things I do see as my role, is to help advise and guide, and if there's opportunities for players, to present them to them. And you know, we're hopeful. I think when the UPL season comes back in October, hopefully, then I think the exposure of our players will be much greater than it is now.
And then at your age, you're one of the youngest coaches in international football. I remember you were in Sierra Leone at 27. What are the challenges that you faced managing players your age and others even above you?
I think naturally people get drawn towards the fact that, look, there's no doubt about it. I'm a young coach. I still am. You know, I've been in the professional game for 7 years now, and I've been in football as a coach since I was 16. So we're now approaching, 19 years as a coach. So that's a long time. You know, my professional career is long, but I do work. In Sierra Leone, almost all of the players were older than I was. Here we have 1 or 2 that are the same age. But it really has never been a challenge, because I think it doesn't come down to your age, it comes down to your personality, how you interact with people. And the knowledge, you've got to be an expert in your field, and I feel I know this game very well. I know what I want to do with this game very well. And so, look, over the years, have there been people who've pushed back? Have there been players who've decided to try and test my authority? Of course that's happened. But I'm someone who isn't afraid of those type of things. My personality is one where I'm confident. I believe what I'm trying to do. And when people see that, they come on board. They come on board and join what you're trying to do. And I think that's the same here, really. So, it's never been an issue, but I think that's to do with my personality and my character and my understanding of the game.
All right, back to Rwanda. The president, Paul Kagame, is one of the people that love football. Did you ever have any personal interaction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the president and we met, I think, 3 times in Rwanda. So he obviously came to some games. And also the Rwanda national team were guests at State House on one occasion, and actually on that occasion we had a very good conversation. You know, the president in Rwanda is a huge football fan, big Arsenal fan, as can be seen by Rwanda's sponsorship of the team.
And in Uganda he supports AC Villa.
Yeah, and even beyond that, I believe he has a box at Barcelona. It's either Barcelona or Real Madrid. I'm certain he has an executive box at one of those. But a huge football fan, a huge sports fan beyond that, because I know he's a big basketball supporter as well. And so, yeah, you know, he's someone who very much enjoys the sport. But equally, also I know here in Uganda, we have a president, His Excellency, he's also a big sports fan. You know, and I haven't had the opportunity, you know, here to interact with the president yet. But, you know, I hope, given that, you know, we plan for more success for the Cranes, you know, I hope that opportunity will come sooner rather than later.
And then during your time in Rwanda, you guided the team to the quarterfinals of the African Nations Championship. That was 2016. And then your stay in Sierra Leone, they got their best ever FIFA ranking. And just a few months here, you've already won the CECAFA Senior Challenge Cup. What would you take as your biggest achievement so far in your career?
Well, that's a very good question. Biggest achievement. It's funny, I think it's hard to say really. I think all of them, every situation was so different. So whilst people might look at saying, oh, taking Sierra Leone to 50th in the world, you know, how does that compare? Chan is obviously the sort of domestic-based tournament, but the ambitions of Rwanda were so different to Sierra Leone. You got to remember, in Sierra Leone, it was all professional players playing in Europe.
Stéphane Sessegnos?
No, Sessegnon is he's not Sierra Leonean, Malian, I think, is he? Or
Stéphane?
He's not Sierra Leonean.
I thought he's.
No, but anyway, regardless, all top players, and so the ambitions are different. You know, winning the WAFU Cup, which is the equivalent of CECAFA for Sierra Leone, isn't really an objective. It's not something you're thinking about. Getting up in the world rankings, trying to qualify for tournaments. Whereas with Rwanda, yes, we want to go to the African Cup of Nations and the World Cup, but we also know the team is at an earlier stage in its development. So performing on the continental level at Chan was the next stage in our development. So I think all of those moments are significant in themselves. I think even here, I know Uganda has a great history of winning CECAFA, but you've got to remember, of that squad in December, a lot of those players hadn't even played for Uganda before. We brought in a number of new players, and I think only one of them had won CECAFA before. So for a lot of them it was a first. And you've got to do these achievements for yourself to help build your own career. So, you know, the one thing I've learned though, regardless of all of those things, the very next day as a coach, you're thinking of what comes next. You know, yes, you leave the players to enjoy the moment, but even after CECAFA here, the very next day it was, okay, let's review, let's see what went well, what didn't go well, and let's see how we can improve, because our ambitions are higher. You know, it's a bit like Sierra Leone. Yes, winning CECAFA was good and it's an important part of the process, but that process for me has to end with us going to the World Cup. And so that's a long road, but it's part of the process.
So at the end of the day, you cannot just pick that very one achievement that you take as your biggest.
Do you know, for me personally,
yeah,
in terms of my career, what it means for my career, I think being appointed Rwanda coach was an important milestone in my career, because 70% of football coaches only have one job. After they leave their first job as a head coach, they are never employed as a head coach again. And then if you get the second job and you do well, you'll get the third job and the fourth job. But the majority of us in my industry only ever get one opportunity. So getting that second opportunity with Rwanda was, in terms of my own career, important. But then beyond that, you've got to keep being successful, because if you start losing, nobody will want you to be their coach.
Of course, and then during your time in Sierra Leone is the time we had the Ebola outbreak. Do you think it hindered a lot of what you could have achieved with the team because you are playing games away from home?
No, absolutely. The Ebola, look, Sierra Leone is part of me. There's only Ireland have I spent more time of my life in than Sierra Leone. I was in Sierra Leone for close to 5 years, so it's a second home for me. And so the Ebola outbreak, you know, was devastating on so many levels for that country. And in a very, you know, let's be honest, football is one of the small things in life at that moment. But definitely, look, we were drawn in a group that was incredibly difficult. We were with the Ivory Coast, Cameroon, and DR Congo.
That was a tough one.
And, you know, it was probably the toughest group out of all of the groups drawn for that qualifying series. But we genuinely believed we could qualify and go to the African Cup of Nations. And you got to remember, at that stage, it was the top team and the 3 best runners-up. So it wasn't even like now where it's the top 2. So for us, we had a genuine belief that we could qualify from that group. But then we couldn't play any home games, and the 2 games that I looked after during that period were the game away to the Ivory Coast, and then our home game against DR Congo, played in Lubumbashi, DR Congo.
Yeah, I remember.
So, and both games were very tight. We were very unfortunate to lose in the Ivory Coast, and then, you know, just fatigue took its toll in the second game. But we were very disappointed. But then you look at that group, the Ivory Coast went on to win the African Cup of Nations from that qualifying series, and DR Congo finished as bronze medalists in 3rd place. So it shows you how challenging the group was, but we really believed we could do something in it, and not being able to play at home sort of derailed the entire process.
You've worked with Abdallah Mbilu and then Charles Livingston in Babas as your assistants. How important are they to you as in preparation for the team, as well as what do they bring to the table?
So for me, and I think even it's been a learning curve for the technical staff here in Uganda, because maybe in the past, when there's been foreign coaches come in, they take 100% control. They say, I'm doing everything, and the assistant coaches, you give them small things to do. But if you talk to the staff here, it's the complete opposite. My mindset is, if you're here as part of the staff, if you have a contract to be the assistant coach or the physio or whatever it happens to be, then you have an input. You have to work. You've got to be part of this process. And so whether it's on the training field of taking active control of training so that I can step back and look at the big picture, or in the team meetings that we have where, you know, our staff meetings, I should say, where people all get the opportunity to say what they believe and what they think. And it's all part of the process. Ultimately, you know, I have to make the final decision, but I like to hear other people's input because, look, I don't know everything. I've got experience, but Abdullah has experience, Charles has experience, Fred Kajoba has experience, Jeffrey Massa has experience. You know, all of these guys have huge experience that can only add to making good decisions. And so their role is really important. You can't, it's not about me as an individual. It's not about the coaching staff in isolation. It's about everybody, the team, the federation, the staff, all coming together to be successful. So they've all got their role to play.
So how often do you guys communicate and speak about preparations for the team, especially during this period of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Oh, all the time. Like, we obviously have our groups on like WhatsApp and stuff that we're in regular contact, but even in terms of meetings, like even I was with Abdullah only a few days ago, you know, speaking with Charles and with even Fred I spoke to yesterday. So, you know, we're in pretty much constant contact. It's about developing the team, and it's what can we do, and it's about developing ourselves as well, because, you know, it's not good enough. We're asking our players to improve every day. So we also have to ask ourselves as coaches to improve every day.
I understand.
You know, and so that's what we do. And yeah, we're moving in the right direction. We might not be on the grass at the moment, but I was speaking with Dennis Onyango a few weeks ago about this, and he said it perfectly. He said, anybody who doesn't use this time to improve themselves is a fool.
You know, regardless whether you're a player or a coach or anyone, whatever you're doing,
you've got to use your time effectively. If you're sitting at home, look, That's not to say you shouldn't relax. Everyone should relax and recharge and have that, casual time. But beyond that, we should be looking for self-improvement. Like even for myself, on Wednesday, I'm starting an online course with the University of Cambridge in England on high-impact leadership. So again, for me, I'm looking for something extra, because if I can get something extra, I can give it to other people, and we can all improve.
And then the Federation of Uganda Football Associations, FUFA, did set the target of 2026 World Cup for Uganda to make a maiden appearance. However, during your unveiling, you said it's even possible to qualify for Qatar 2022. Would you regard that as a failure, just in case we don't reach Qatar 2022?
For me personally, I want to climb the biggest mountains. That's the way I look at things. Some people and other people say when you go into new jobs, you should manage expectations. Come in and tell them, okay, it's going to take time, lower the expectations so that when you succeed, then everyone will cheer and you'll be on their shoulders and they'll exalt you as the hero. That's not the way I look at things. The way I look at things, I said to you already, is we can only be successful if we all do it together. And part of that for me is people believing we can do it. Because if you don't believe you can do it, what's the point in starting? If I go to trek up to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, if I don't believe I can reach the top, it's going to be a struggle. Every step's going to be a struggle. Why am I doing this? I can never be successful. But if I believe that I can be successful, if I believe I can reach the top of the mountain, I have more energy. I have more resolve because I have a focus.
There's more motivation.
Exactly. And so that's what I say to the players. A great phrase of mine. And look, I don't set these ambitions if I don't believe it's possible. But it doesn't need to be guaranteed. Is it guaranteed that we'll go to Qatar in 2022? No. It's difficult. Look at the group we're in. It's filled with opportunity, but it's also filled with a lot of danger. Because if you believe going to Kigali and taking 3 points from Rwanda in their own backyard is easy, then I think we're kidding ourselves.
Just like going to Nairobi.
It's not easy. They're derby games. Mali are a hugely dangerous opponent. Lots of talented young players. Some of the best young players on the continent coming through. And so, but there is opportunity. So can we do it? Yes. Now we need to believe we can do it. And you know what? We might fail. And we'll all be incredibly disappointed. But the reason we'll be disappointed if we fail to reach it is because we believed. And so that's part of my process. And does that put more pressure on me as a coach? I know it does. Because people at the end of the day, if we fall short and we don't go to Qatar, people will say, oh, but you said we could go.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And could I make life easier for myself by saying, FUFA said 2026, that's our target? Of course, that would make life easier. But I think if you look at my life to date and my career to date, I'm not the person to take the easy option. I'm the person who wants the challenge, who wants to achieve something. And so for me personally, to answer your question, would I feel that like we'd failed if we didn't go? For me personally, yes. Because I look at the players we have and I see their enthusiasm and their determination and their talent, and I think this is possible. But I also know it's a tough road.
Yeah,
it's a tough road.
It's a tough one. And then you replaced Sebastian Desabre after a very colorful Africa Cup of Nations in regards to Uganda, because since 1978 we've had never played beyond the group stages. But then we reached the round of 16. Were you under any pressure to fill the big boots that he did leave?
Look, I think me and Sebastian don't know each other that well. Since I came into this job, we've got to know each other a little bit, because obviously for a period of time he was the Pyramids head coach, where obviously we had Abdullah Mala, and then when he went to Wydad, Joel Madondo was going there, and Murshid Juko had just left. So I've had contact with Sebastian, and he's been very gracious and a very nice man from what I can tell. But for me, look, I've never looked to try and be anybody else. I'm going to do it my way, and some people will like that, and some people might not like that, and that's okay. but I'm going to do it my way, and if it works, fantastic. But I've got to stay true to my beliefs, and I think the players are coming on board with that, and the staff seem energized by it. So yes, the team did fantastically well to get to the last 16. The game against Senegal was very unfortunate because on another day it wasn't so big differences, but it shows you what top players like Sadio Mane can do to you. When you have these world superstars, they only need one moment. But our aim is to gather ourselves, to go again, and try and go better, so that we're not looking back at 1978 for an appearance in the finals. Can we make a modern day fairy tale where a team can maybe get to the last four or even the final? Because we have talent here. We just have to harness it, point it in the right direction, and then let it fly.
And then not so many coaches have managed clubs and then also got a chance to manage the national teams. How different are the two jobs?
In some ways, they're very different. How you manage your time is extremely different. In a club environment, you're obviously on the training field every day, and so you're in-person teaching. It's like being a teacher in school every day. And so you're on the field, you can build those relationships, that camaraderie with the players very easily. But your preparation time in terms of your analysis, your review, all of this stuff that goes into football, modern football as well, you're very restricted because you have 2 games a week. You're having to work, you need a bigger staff, because whereas here with Uganda, I can survive with maybe 2 people doing the analysis. At a club environment, I need 4 or 5 because the time is shorter. Whereas with a national team, your preparation, you have so much time. And so you can really get down into fine detail in terms of what you need to do to be successful in a given game. However, you then need to employ alternative methods in educating your players. So for example, here with Uganda this year, we've set up an online platform. So we do tactical team meetings online. So even like 10 days ago, we were doing a tactical presentation for the players in terms of our game model. So when we lose the ball, what should different positions do in that moment? So that's now, we've taken that all online. If I was in a club environment, I would just have a team meeting and I would have the players sat in front of me. Whereas here, we only have the players together for 4 or 5 days before an international. So you don't have the same amount of time to educate them on the small details in football. So you got to find a balance. And equally, you've got to find those alternative methods for building relationships. So I spend a lot of time, on WhatsApp calls, on messages, on Zoom chats with the players, just to try and be closer with them, even though they might be in Turkey or Morocco or South Africa. So yeah, they are different, but both incredibly enjoyable.
And then during your career so far, if you tasked to name the top 5 players that you've managed, who would they be?
I think clearly Dennis Onyango is right up there. You couldn't leave Dennis out. I think I could pick a very good 5-a-side team, actually. Dennis, look, his quality is, you can't argue with his quality, but his character and his personality is huge. Quite a quiet person, I think, but quite a humble and down-to-earth person, but a great captain.
He can be talkative at times.
Yeah, I know, but he's very focused. You have players like him, but then also maybe at the other end of the scale, someone like Kai Kamara, who played for Norwich City and Middlesbrough in the English Premier League, is now at Colorado Rapids. And actually, I was speaking to Kai for about an hour last week. We're still very close, but Kai's very outspoken. And even currently in what's happening in the world with, the Black Lives Matter, campaigns, Kai is right at the forefront of that in the United States of America, in the football fraternity. And, because he's someone who knows how to use his position and how powerful his position within society is. So Kai was a remarkably good player. We had a guy, even young players I've coached. There's a young player came through my academy in Sierra Leone, Mustafa Bundu, who currently plays for Aarhus in Denmark. But even this summer was being linked with clubs like Monaco. I think he was linked with a move to Spain as well.
Which position does he play?
The striker. He's a number 9 or wide forward. So you've got these guys. But you've also got some very talented young players coming through here who, it's all potential at the moment. And, so you look at the likes of, Alan Okello, Mustafa Chiza, Karim Watambala, these young guys who are coming through, and it's huge potential. But potential is like, if we were to build a fire here, if I want that fire to grow big and strong, I have to keep feeding the fire. I have to keep attending to the fire. If I just leave it on its own, it will burn out. And that's the same with potential. So for the likes of Okello, Watambala, all of these talented young players, we have to attend to them like a fire. We have to keep feeding them and nurturing them so that they grow strong and big and they fulfill that potential. So yeah, I've been very fortunate in my career to work with some really good players. And
so you've named the 3 so far, the others are potential, now the 2?
2 more. I also worked with a guy called Waris, who is a Ghanaian striker, currently plays for Porto. So Waris I coached as
Is it Majid Waris?
Yeah. So I coached Waris as a 15-year-old at the Right to Dream Academy. So Waris was incredibly talented. And then I think another Ghanaian player, Mohamed Abu, who currently is back in Scandinavia but started at Manchester City. Got a bronze medal for Ghana in the African Cup of Nations. So, but for him, Mohamed, hugely talented player, but the thing that set him apart was his work ethic. There was nothing was going to stop him becoming a professional footballer. Nothing in this world would stop him. His desire and commitment was just more than I've ever seen. And he deserves everything he's got in his career, and he's had a really good career now. So, yeah, I've been very fortunate over the years.
And then on a personal level, how often do you speak to the family back home? Especially during this pandemic, whereby in Europe it was a little worse than here.
Yeah, so for me, it's every week really. You're speaking to, parents, brothers, sisters, usually weekly. It's quite an interesting thing.
Not married yet?
Me, no. My other half is here, but not married.
Ugandan?
No, Mexican.
Oh.
So we, the family back at home, it's every week. And do you know what, again, I consider myself very fortunate to be working around the world in this era. Because if you go back 20, 30 years, even 10, 15 years ago, staying in contact with people on the other side of the world was very difficult, whereas now you can pick up your phone and you can't just speak to them, but you can see them, you can communicate, you can do all of these things very easily at the touch of a button now. So, but yeah, it's generally weekly. We'll catch up with what's going on in the world, and it's one of those strange sort of paradoxes of living so far away, is you probably talk more often, whereas if you lived in the next village, you might talk less often than if you're living on the other side of the world. But when you're on the other side of the world, it's at the front of your mind to keep in contact, and it's important.
So you've spent a lot of time in Africa. How often do you go back to your country to visit them physically?
Ireland, maybe once or twice a year. I don't get back to Ireland that much. I left Ireland when I was 18 to move to England. And I've never lived in Ireland since. So you're now talking it's 17 years since I lived in Ireland.
Yeah, that's a tough
one.
It's
a long time.
That says a lot about the mentality, personality, and attitude.
I think it's just one of those things. I knew, not having been a professional player, I knew that if I wanted to reach the top of football, that I would have to prove myself in a variety of different positions. And if you'd said to an 18-year-old version of me who knew he wanted to be a coach, and you said, okay, you can go to a place like Uganda with the quality of players we have here in Uganda and be on the fringes of going to a World Cup, people wouldn't have believed that. They wouldn't have believed it was possible. But for me, I knew I had to go and prove myself in all of these different environments and prove that I was justified in getting these type of positions. And also that I would be ready for this, because you don't just want to, people talk about, oh, I'd like to coach this team, I'd like to coach that team. But you know what? I want to be successful. And for me, you need to be ready for these positions, because trust me, if you come to coach Uganda and you're not ready, the likes of Emmanuel Okwe and Khalid Aucho and Dennis Onyango are not going to stand and listen to you if you're not serious, if you're not ready for this. They will be very quickly knocking on someone's door saying this coach is not the right one. So you've got to be ready for this position when you sit in the manager's seat. And I think the last sort of, as I said, 19 years have prepared me for this. But that did involve leaving home and being a little bit uncomfortable.
And then a little back to the game. How important is media to football, and what would be the difference you've seen in Uganda in comparison to Rwanda and Sierra Leone and then maybe Bangladesh and Ghana? How does the media operate?
I think, look, the connection between supporters and the team is so important. And that is the media in many senses. Now in the modern media, you have the sort of influx of social media, which I think, as you've seen all around the world, people can take more ownership of the message, which I think is important. Because, look, just like in football, there is good footballers and not so good footballers. There's good coaches, not so good coaches. In the media, there's also good media and not so good media. And so I think it's important to see that. But because we now have social media where we're able to own the message, it's more difficult for the lower quality media to maybe write something that is not accurate, because it's very easy to be called out on that and say, no, this is the real story, this is the real information. So I think what's really good about here in Uganda is people are hungry for information about football. There's a variety of platforms, whether it's TV, radio, internet, newspapers, whatever it happens to be, there's a variety of platforms for information, which is good. I do think some of it could be more accurate than it is. But that's a challenge we face all over the world, is if you go back 10 years ago, when there was no internet, maybe in terms 15 years ago, let's say, and the people were writing a news story, and the press was the next day. So they had time to write it, they reread it, they fact-checked it, they considered it, and then they published. Whereas now, it's write the story, publish. There's no, the process for a lot of people has been shortened, and what happens with that process is, unfortunately for some people, fact-checking gets lost. And so sometimes I read stories, and then I look at them and I go, well, I know that's not true. I know it's not true. I don't know where they've got that information from. And so, but look, I think media plays an important role. There's no doubt about that. That's why I try to make myself available, and because getting the information to the supporters is the most important thing.
And then for the time that we've been in this country, there is a lot of delicacy. There is Rolex, Luombo, anything like that. What have you tasted here that you've never tasted anywhere before?
Funny, I've never, well, a lot of things here I've tried. I always believe you have to try things. You know, even if you don't like it, that's okay.
I'm not one that tries a lot.
No, I try pretty much everything. I was in Cambodia a number of years ago and had deep-fried tarantula, which is, you know, if you're willing to eat deep-fried tarantula and it's a spider the size of your hand, you'll eat anything. So I'll try anything. Luombo, I needed to go and rest for 2 or 3 hours after having had it. You know, it's a very heavy meal. Rolex, they have something quite similar in Bangladesh, because obviously the paratha and stuff, the bread, is a very Indian subcontinent thing. What else have I had here? Matoke I had never had anywhere else, which is interesting because I've spent a lot of time obviously in Rwanda, in Tanzania, Kenya, but I'd never come across matoke before, even being in those countries. So it was a first here. And it's okay. I don't dislike it, but nor if you said, what is your last meal you're going to have, would it be on that list? But it's one of the ones, if someone served it to me, I would happily eat it. So, and also the grasshoppers are good. Lots of protein, they're good for you, grasshoppers. Just maybe less frying. If we could grill them, it would be better. Yeah.
Your last message to the viewers and readers of Kawowo Sports?
I would just say to people, you know, your support is massively valued. The Ugandan players and the staff we are motivated to walk out at Nambole in front of a full audience. And I've said this before, yes, we've been to 2 African Cup of Nations recently. We want to go again and go further, but we also want to go to the World Cup. So we've got big games coming up against Kenya, Rwanda, Mali. So come out, fill the stadium, and be the 12th man, and join us as we try to qualify for Uganda's first ever World Cup.
All right, it's been a pleasure hosting you, and hopefully we shall be meeting again soon, but probably at our offices, or I'll be coming home for you to prepare that meal.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, viewers out there. See you next time. Thanks to the coach. Thanks to everyone that has made this interview a success. Bye for now.